This is episode 260 of the Wildlife Photography Podcast. In this episode, Q&A. Hey everybody, my name is Gerry, I'm from Walt and I, and this is episode 260, which means it's a Q&A. Now, just for those of you that have been listening for a while, in a couple of episodes back, I mentioned that I want to do like a Q&A where some of you guys interview me. Now that is still going to happen. It's just a time thing, number one, with travels. But also every time we get back from travels in the office, there's a lot of stuff going down. So not always that easy, but it is going to happen. So what I thought for this particular episode of the podcast, I'm going to go back and I went through my emails and I printed a whole bunch of emails that I haven't answered yet. And I thought, let me use this opportunity to kind of clump them together and just work through everything. Now, I just said this on my Instagram as well. This is probably going to be a bit of a techie episode. There's a lot of questions in here on gear and what lenses and some settings and things like this. The last one, also I mentioned on my Instagram this morning, is a pretty cool one for me, which has to do with when to push through versus pulling back on your photography, for training, for life, teaching, whatever. So those are some of the ones coming up. And I'm going to go through all of them. I'm going to be reading quite a bit for you as well. So if you are watching on Instagram TV or YouTube, then you're going to see me reading. It's one of those things. But on the podcast, you guys will get that as well. Now, the last couple of days have kind of kicked my ass a bit. It's been hell of a busy. Just moved house, and I don't want to ever move house again. It's just on and on and on. It's quite rough. But settled in for most parts and finally get back to this. The cool thing as well for me is I've got this now, right, which is episode 260. Episode 261, 262, 263, and 264 are already prepped and ready to go. In those, Mike and Johan and Trevor and all the guys get involved, and they've got some pretty cool content. So in the next couple of days from when you watch this one, loads of new content coming up from the guys. So let's get into your Q&A. Like I said, quite a bit of reading here because we're going to go deep. So the first one is from Nick Walker. Now, Nick emailed myself and Andrew Dankwitz. He's coming on a safari with us, and he was asking about gear. So I'm going to read this for you, and then we can go deeper into this. Nick says, I'm starting to plan for my trip with Wild Eye to the Yomora camp in November. Clearly, it's the camera kit I'm considering most seriously. Like previous trips to South Africa and Botswana, I've rented a 400mm prime from you guys, and now I'm considering my other lenses and bodies. I have my good old faithful 70-200 2.8 and will certainly bring it along. Also, definitely one of my wider angle options, 24-105 or 10-22, maybe both because they're not terribly big. My main lens dilemma is to bring the 100-400 Mark II, as with 70-200 and the prime from you guys and teleconverters, that should cover most focal lengths. Leaving it would make my kit lighter for sure, but there's always a sense of FOMO if a lens break. Thoughts? Now, there's a couple of choices you have to make, Nick, and if anybody of you watching or listening is in the same boat. When you're planning for a trip, you have one of two options. Number one, you're either going to make sure you can cover yourself from super wide all the way to telephoto, as much as you can get. Now, what I mean by that is you can have, let's talk Nikon just off the top. What are we talking here? We haven't mentioned camera bodies yet. No. 40-24, 24-70, 70-200, 200-400, and 600. Right? Because with a converter, you get 560 out of the 200, 400. The biggest problem I have with that is that many lenses makes it very difficult. I've had people come on a safari and they literally have 4 camera bodies with 4 lenses attached and they miss most of the shots. Why? Because they have to choose which one to use. Now, even though that sounds quite terrible, it's not actually a bad thing. Let me tell you why. There is a lot, I believe, to be said to have, for example, a 70-200 and a 400, right? Like in Nick's case here. Because then you're forcing your creative mind, your photographic eye, your photographic mind, you're forcing it to think in a certain way, yeah? There's a line up on the ridge. You can then take your 400, zoom in tight with a converter even tighter, or with a 70-200, you can get the versatility and shoot more animal and environment stuff. If on the flip side now, you have 100-400, then I would be able to do pretty much anything. You can go from 100 shooting through the range, and it makes it easier. I do, however, think easier is not always the best way, because we get into like a rut and you just shoot away. And often with 100 to 400 or a 80 to 400, people tend to shoot it at its max anyway. They're shooting these things at 400 anyway. So Nick, what I would suggest for you, go and look at your previous trip. If you used 100 to 400, go and look in Lightroom, look at the EXIF information and see what kind of focal lengths you normally use. It's the same as people say, oh, I must have a 2.8, I rented one. But then if you look at what they shot it at, they never shoot the 2.8 at 2.8. So go and look, Nick, at how much, when you've shot the 100 to 400, what kind of ranges you work in. Also, if you have particular shots in mind, for example, if you want more of the Mara, because that's where you're going, with the amazing skies behind it, then take the 70 to 200 and the 400, because you can bang out the close with the 400, and on the 70 to 200, you will have the ability to then shoot the sky. Whereas if you have 100 to 400, it might confuse you in between. I'm all for a creative crutch. I think it's a great thing because it challenges you. That said, if it's going to be your only time going to the bush, take the 100, 400. It's the safe option. However, depending on your portfolio, I don't know your work, Nick, so I can't comment on this, but depending on the type of images, a 400 2.8 at a close distance on a line portrait is going to create something very, very different to 100 to 400, what's it, 5.6 or 6.3 at the max. So if you're looking for a certain type of image quality and bokeh and background, then you might want to go for the 400. So personally, if I were you, I would take the 70 to 200, I would take a 400, and I would have maybe a 24 to 105 in the bag, right? But just keep this in mind. People ask this often as well, is why shouldn't I keep the wide angle on one camera and a telephoto on the other? Because when you change to a wide angle, you often have time. The elephants are slowly walking, you have time to change. The sun setting, you have time to change. You're never going to have time if you want to quickly change to a telephoto. So I would always lead on your two cameras with your primary and your secondary weapon, and then your small little third weapon stays in the bag. So next, to come back, I would do 70, 200, 2.8. I would do 400, 2.8, take a converter. The 100, 400 is just going to confuse you, I think. I really do. But again, it depends on what you want to create, what type of images you're looking for. Right, carrying on with your email, Nick. Next dilemma is Cameron's body. I have the 70 Mark II, which should be great. I have a pretty old but faithful 1D3. I also have an old 7D. I've been considering selling these, but a quote was only £300 for the pair. Then I was considering something else, possibly a used 7D2 or maybe a 1DX. However, that and the Mark II are pretty expensive, even used. Also slightly worried, mirrorless is the future, and therefore just use my camera bodies and wait. Okay, you're slightly worried that mirrorless is the future. You need to get rid of that worry, because it is the future. It's happening now. It's literally happening right now. So if it's for Cameron, use the bodies that you have. Shoot the bodies that you have, hang back and wait. I still think Nikon and Canon are a little bit behind in the mirrorless game. Sony, Olympus, those guys, they've jumped to the next level. I know literally this morning on my Instagram, I saw the Z50, is it? A new Nikon mirrorless. But for me, I would wait. For Cameron, use the 7D2, any of the other ones just to shoot around, but you're not going to get much money for it, like you said. So wait for the mirrorless, because the game is changing. It's not going to change, it is changing. It's changed. It has already. So Nick, I hope that helps. I know Andrew Dankwitz also emailed you back with his thoughts. Let us know if we can help with anything else before your Mara trip. All right, moving on. Next one. All right, Sean Felding. I'm going to just read again from the top and we'll take it as it goes. Love the podcast, massive fan. Thank you, Sean. That's amazing. I only started listening recently, but I'm working my way backwards through all of them. It may come as a slight surprise to you, but I do not own a camera and have only ever once taken a photo on a DSLR. Now that's pretty awesome that you listen, so thank you for that. I am, however, a big fan of the bush and birding, and I think your podcasts hold massive value even for non-photographers. You're a rock star, Sean. Thank you. But here we go. Sean's got two big questions here. I'm going to read them for you. I'm looking at getting into photography. I've listened to enough podcasts to know that before I ask your thoughts on the equipment I want to buy, I need to give you the what and why. For those of you that haven't listened in the past or who've just jumped on board, people ask often, what camera must I buy? And it's like, what do you want to do with it? Because then it becomes an easier decision. That's what Sean's meaning here. I really enjoy animals and being outdoors. I've also recently got quite into birding, and I feel like a camera would be a fun way to add another dimension / element and excitement to my outdoor adventures. Couldn't agree more. I'm only really interested in taking pictures of animals and birds, and probably of surfers when I'm down at the coast. No landscapes or portraits at this point. Reading up and following photography. It excites me how one can do cool stuff with the camera when you take it off auto. Preach. I did for the day. Even though it's, I did take one photo a few weeks ago with an old Nikon camera and a 300mm kit lens that I borrowed for the day. Even though it's probably a shit photo, I think it's awesome because I wanted a somewhat blurry background and managed to achieve this by taking it off auto, and I'm super stoked. That's the good shit right there, Sean. Is by going off auto, yes, you take control. For those of you listening, if you are still shooting on auto or doing auto things in your processing, you are giving all your creative control away. You're saying to the camera, I don't care about my work, you decide. So good on that, Sean, that's great. So really, I just want to get into it myself. No sales, maybe an odd picture on Instagram one day. I hope it's more than an odd picture than just the one every once in a while. Do more. So the question, here we go. That being said, I was looking at a Canon 200D with an EF 18-55 and EF 75-300 kit lenses with a Sigma 150-600 for the fast stuff. After doing a bit of reading, my opinion is now that it may be worth spending a bit more to get the 18-55 IS STM and 55-250 STM lenses instead. My questions are, what is your opinion on the 200D as an entry-level camera? Is it worth spending the extra on the newer 250D? If you can, yes. Sean, what I'm seeing here is you want to get into this. You already see the potential for what happens when you go off auto. You're asking the right questions. You're understanding your what and your why. I would, and look, off the top, I'm not sure what the jump is between the two from a price point of view. I would go for the bigger one for now, the 250, because it's going to last you for longer. You are going to go into an exponential growth phase once you start digging into this. And I think you're going to get capped by the camera's ability pretty soon. So why not just go the extra 250? Look, if it's a couple of £1,000 or dollars more, no, but I would go for the higher one. Then, after listening to your podcast on mirrorless being the future, would it be worth beginning on an entry-level mirrorless like the EOS M6 or similar, or better to practice and learn the basics on a DSLR? Now, on that, and this is something I get asked often since I've been shooting Olympus, is it doesn't matter. It really, really doesn't. The basics, guys, are the same. If I hold, I can go fetch. If I hold a DSLR camera, yes, and I'm going to shoot it, I've set it up like I want to use it. I take my mirrorless, whatever brand, right? You can set up the buttons. They are virtually identical. It's the same as you saying, listen, I want to learn how to drive. Should I learn with a Volkswagen or a Toyota? The basics is the same. The things you're going to do is the same. There's a bit of ergonomic changes, but everything else is the same. So, as with the previous question, if you want to get into mirrorless, I would do it now. I would do it now. But the practice and learning the basics on one or the other does not matter. I do think, just as I'm talking now, I do think that if you're going to learn on a mirrorless, I think you're going to learn faster. Let me tell you why. Inside the mirrorless EVF, the electronic viewfinder, on a normal camera, you can look at the back of the screen, yes? And you can see all the details. In a mirrorless camera, you can see that in the viewfinder as you're looking through the camera. You can see the histogram, you can see as you expose, you can change all the settings from the inside. I think that that kind of learning curve is going to help you because you've got that immediate feedback. So if I say to you on a trip one day, underexposed by 2 clicks, which is 2/3, you would be able to see what it does. That connection from a learning point of view, I think, is amazing. So if you are going to change, do it now. But don't think that one is better than the other to practice on. I really, it's a camera. It's just a camera. But the mirrorless does offer that little bit of extra. So maybe look at that. Okay, second question from Sean here. While that seems like an amazing company with amazing packages, appreciate that, thank you. However, for many average South Africans, the packages are pretty steep, I get that. Exotic destinations aside, I would give up a lot just to spend some time in the presence of one of your guides and absorb their knowledge and hear their thoughts, even if it was just for a morning walk around Delta Park or the Walter Sisulu Botanical Gardens. Is this something you've ever thought about, possibly with larger group sizes to compensate for lower rates? I do understand that practically it's not really a business option as the root of your competitive advantage, which will not be done any favors by walking photo tours around Delta Park. But do you think, in general, there is some sort of market for this, or someone or a company who does it already? P.S. I've used the Google machine and it didn't come up with much. Okay, so I'm going to backtrack here. Is this something you've ever thought about, possibly with larger group sizes to compensate for low rate? We've done this in the past. What we've done is we went on a Sunday morning, and a couple of years ago now, we would meet at, what's this place? Monte Cassino Bird Gardens. And we would just go and shoot and help and talk and this. Even though we run a business, yes, doing something like that would not make money. I wouldn't see it as a money-making exercise anyway. I would see it as giving back to the community and trying to make a difference, right? It's the same as our digital photography courses. It's a loss leader, but it's a great way for people to get into the brand and get passionate, not about our brand only, but also about photography and travel in general. So is it something we would like to do? Yes, I would love to do something like this. The only thing that argues me on that is our diaries. Like Andrew Dankwitz is sitting right here now, yeah? He has been in the office for maybe 12 days in the last 3 months. We come back for 3 days, we go. So I'm very cognizant of giving my guides a break as well and managing their workload, because it's strenuous and hard being in the office for that amount of time. Freudian slip. No. For being in the field, you have to have the downtime. But doing something like this for us as a part of brand building and giving back, I would absolutely love to. And maybe I must commit to you, Sean, that early in the new year, this year is pretty much a write-off. I mean, our diaries are booking into 2021, but there is some time early next year. Maybe we will look at something and we can do like a free workshop or a day early in January. Whether it's Monte Cassino or the Botanical Gardens, whatever, just kind of get out into the community and do something like that. I think it's great. Are there people doing this? Yes, I think there are a couple. I can't think of any now, but I do think so. The problem for me there is when they start doing this from a monetization point of view and to make money off it, I don't think the passion's going to be there. I really don't. Taking people out there, is it hard work? Yes, it is. If that's the only thing you do, then hey, so be it. But it becomes very difficult to do those things again and again and again and monetize it unless it's a part of a cradle to grave approach where someone does a botanical garden with you, then they come and do a course, then they do a weekend course, then they travel. But I'm sure there must be someone. Sean, if you want to send me another email when you hear this, I will see if I can find something for you. I know in Cape Town there's quite a few and they do pretty good stuff. But let me know and we can go from there. But let me see if we can do something early next year. I think it's a great idea. I really do. Right, next one. What have we got here? Kevin Furry says, hey Gerry, excellent podcast. I've really enjoyed the show. Thank you, Kevin. That's amazing. Question for you regarding my mirrorless Olympus setup and the Olympus teleconverters. I have the original OMD EM1 as well as the EM1 Mark II. I bring both on Safari. Generally speaking, I usually put my Olympus 40-150 on the older EM1 and the 300 Pro lens on the Mark II. I own the 1.4 converter. I'm tempted by the 2x converter, which applied to the 40-150 would result in a maximum 300 focal length and cover any gaps with the 300. Often I find myself too close for the fixed 300. With the 1.4 converter with effective telephotos, with the 1.4 teleconverter with effective focal length of 210, this gap in focal length scares me. With that said, I know there are negative trade-offs to consider with teleconverters. Without the converter, I know you can crop photos with decent resolution. Curious to hear your thoughts and recommendations. Would someday love to buy the upcoming 100 to 400 Olympus Pro, but I'm uncertain of affordability. Thanks for your perspective. Hope to join you in Safari one day. All the best, Kevin. Okay, Kevin, so the combo that you mentioned there, I have that as well. So I've got an EM1 Mark II, I've got the EM1X, 40-150, I've got the 300, I've got the 1.4 teleconverter, and yes, the 2x is definitely worth it. I shot one of my clients' ones in the Mara a couple of months ago, and it's proper. It holds up really, really nice. especially on the 300. Now, the 40-150 I have shot with a 1.4 converter. I think you have to play off here the gap that you're missing, right, versus image quality. Now, I'm not a pixel peeper. I'm not going to sit there and zoom into the nth degree. There's critical sharpness. If it's fine, it's fine. Yeah? But to me, I wouldn't be scared of that gap in focal range. It's the same as the question from a couple ago, is it makes you think. If you're too close for the 300, deconstruct your subject. If you've been on safari with me, you'd have done that. Deconstruct the subject into pieces. It makes for great abstract art and creative shooting. If you're further away than the bottom end of your range, then use the environment. Learn to compose better. So I always have my 1.4 converter in my bag. I am going to get the 2x as soon as I get my hand on one. So I use them as and when needed. If I get into a sighting and it's far off, or I know what I want from the sighting, it's like, how's this analogy? It's like the Matrix. I get there, I look at the scene, and it's like these green letters and stuff going. You've seen the Matrix? And I would say, okay, what do I want from this? They're quite far away, so it's going to make for pretty cool animals and environment. I leave the 40-150 clean. I am, however, want to get some close grab shots, so I put the converter on the 300. And each sighting I get to, I make the choice as I get there. If it develops, if a sighting starts getting active, I normally lose the teleconverters because then I have to make quick changes. They come closer, they come further. So I would then just shoot what I have. I can't overthink these things. We do this. Which should I shoot, with a converter or without a converter? Well, just make a choice, because you're never going to know what the other choice was anyway. Yeah? Make a choice, shoot it, make the best of it. But I would always have them with you, and I wouldn't be scared of that in-between range. You can crop them, like you say, which is great. The image quality holds up beautifully. But yeah, don't be scared of it. I think it's a really, really cool to shoot both and have the converters for as and when needed. And the converters are solid, hey. The 1.4 and the 2x, I've shot them both. They hold up beautifully. Really, really nice. And yeah, I would also, the 100 to 400 or the 150 to 400, whatever it is, Olympus Pro, I think it's releasing in January. And I would love to get my hands on that as well. Promises to be really interesting. Effective focal length of 300 to 800 with a built-in converter. So that's pretty cool. Kevin, let me know if that makes sense, and then we can dig deeper if necessary. All right, we keep going. I need a sip of coffee first. Next one is from Louis Kruger. And he says, Gerry, my wife and I are both very keen wildlife photographers. I cannot describe what your podcasts and YouTube videos have done for us. Thank you so much. Thank you for watching and listening, guys. I really appreciate it. Now, I'm going to read this again for you. We predominantly do our photography in the Kruger National Park and concentrate on the Satara region. Normally, we spend between 4 and 6 weeks in August and December. The area we photograph in varies from large open plains north of Satara to relatively dense bush. In August, most of our images are mostly animals and predators around the waterholes and in riverine forests. And in December, it's predominantly bird photography, obviously because the bush is thicker and all the migrants come back. We are currently both using Canon 7D2 bodies. I use a Canon 100 to 400, and my wife uses a Tamron 150 to 600. During our last trip, we experienced the following problems. Subjects close to the cars are problematic due to the minimal focusing distance of our lenses. At several sightings, the maximum reach of both lenses seemed far too short for sharp images, and in certain cases, the composition we wanted could not be obtained. We've decided to take another look at our lenses. Based on discussions with several people and your recommendations in the podcast, we decided we need a more diverse spectrum of lenses. However, due to budget constraints in the new prime lenses out of reach for us, we are limited to second-hand lenses. We are thinking of the following combination. All right, number one, buy a Canon or Tamron 70-200 and use it on a Canon 70D body, which we do not use at present. Is there a major difference in image quality between the Tamron and the Canon? Is this the most suitable lens for subjects up close? Now, Louis, okay, so is there a major difference between the Tamron and the Canon 70-200 2.8? I would challenge anybody, if both lenses are good working order and calibrated and the whole thing, I would challenge anybody to call it once you're done. If you're shooting in good light, yes, and you got the kind of one of the newer ranges Tamron, it's close as damn it. The question you've got to ask yourself is my image quality from here, let's say a Canon's here, and let's say the Tamron is there, or vice versa, right? Is an extra 2, 3, 4, 10,000 Rand worth this amount of image quality? I don't think so. I would personally, and especially because you say that, and I mean, prime lenses, the budgets are just a mission with photography. I would look at a good used Tamron and or Canon. Don't worry about the brand. Will you see the difference? No, you won't. Unless you're one of those, I want to use the word anal people who zoom into 50 million times in the field just so they can see whether the pixel is sharp. Dude, live in the moment, man. Just shoot the image for what you're going to use. And most of those people who do that, they don't use it anyway. Like, what the hell, John? What are you doing? So I would use any of them. You won't see the image quality, especially after you've processed and edited and sharpened and noise reduced. Won't see the difference. Is this the most suitable lens for subjects up close? Suitable is a matter of opinion. It's great. If you're talking close, like next to the road, yes. I would even be tempted to say go wider if things are close. People are very scared of shooting wide because compositionally it challenges you. Yeah. So a 7200 or even something like a 2470 would be optimal, I would say. So if you can, think about this. I would rather you buy a Tamron 72.8 and a Tamron 2470, even if it's an f4, than just a Canon 7200. More diversity and more options to shoot with. Okay, number 2, we can use the Canon 100-400 on the 72. Taking the change in aperture into account, is it practical to use a 1.4 extender on this lens? I won't. I would personally not use an extender on any zoom lens unless it's a 2.8 because you drop in quality. And I remember when a lens focuses, when you're trying to track and focus, yeah, the camera does that at the widest open aperture. So if you have a 2.8 lens, even if you use it at f11, it's still going to lock focus and track based on 2.8. That's where it finds it, and then it does the rest. So if you now put a converter on an already 5.6 lens, the tracking and focus becomes slower, especially if you're going to use it for birds. So on a lens like this, I would not personally put a converter. Wouldn't do it. All right, next option here. We could buy a prime lens for the other Canon 7D2 and sell the Tamron 150-600. I can now get a Canon 400 2.8 at a reasonable price. I'm not sure it makes sense to have the 100-400 and the 400. Would a 1.5 extender make it a more suitable choice? Now, I wouldn't. I mean, again, if you have a 100-400 and a 400, I do think you're doubling up. I do think you're going to sometimes have like we said earlier on, you're going to have a difficult time choosing which one to use. But from an image quality, you're not going to beat a prime 200, especially when comparing it to a 100-400. The 100-400 are great, and you can get some great images with it. But especially for your birding and you're wanting to track fast, I would then say get a 400 and the converter. That would probably be the best of both, I think. Now, your last question here is a kind of summary. What combination would you recommend? Okay. I'm just looking at your options here again. So obviously you both have 7D2s. I would possibly go the route of saying keep the 150-600, lose the 100-400, get a 70-200 and possibly a 2470 and the 400 2.8 because that's going to cover you for everything. Obviously, how and why you fight in the car as to who uses which lens, that's your problem. I can't help with that. But I think that would be my win. I would have the two bodies. I would have a 150-600, 70-200, 2470 and the 400 2.8 with a converter, and then bring your 70D into the mix and you can play around like that. Great choice, and I love the way you think about it. So let me know, Louis, how it goes, and yeah, hope that helps. Right, next one. Okay, this is from MJ Westhazen. I'm going to read for you from the top. Hey Gerry, I discovered the podcast on Sunday and long story short, can't get enough. That's awesome. Thank you, MJ. On the bus this morning, I listened to episode 7 dealing with what should my ISO be? And the question came up again relating to lenses. I've tried many times to get an answer to this question and was wondering if you might put this on your podcast to-do list. It's done. Here it is. A lot of the wildlife action happens at dusk and dawn, where light quality is not as great when it comes to photography. I shoot with a crop sensor camera, a D500, and get added reach whilst on safari. For the longer lenses, 500mm, etc., I'm not going to spend a small fortune to get a 2.8 lens, but I am looking to get a wider aperture lens, something like a 70-200 2.8, to assist with low light shots. Now the tricky part. What I do not understand, if you look at the low light photos out there, you seldomly see them taken at an aperture of 2.8. It's normally 5.6 and smaller. Would a 2.8 lens have an impact even though I take the picture at 8 or 11, compared to a lens with an aperture starting at, let's say, 5.6? I would have thought that if your camera setting is set at a smaller aperture, it changes the lens opening irrespective if the lens has wider aperture capabilities. Why then would a 2.8 lens be better for low light images even if I use a smaller aperture when out in the field? Okay, I hope you guys all followed that, but it goes back to the previous question as well. When you're shooting low light, yeah, there's less light coming in. If a lens has a minimum aperture, or it can go to a maximum of 2.8 aperture, big, yeah, or it can go to 5.6, which is smaller. When you're trying to lock focus and on your target, the lens will focus at the widest aperture, and then when you shoot, it gives you the aperture that you dialed in. That should answer it for you, MJ. Is if you are on a 5.6 and I'm on a 2.8 and we're both trying to focus on the leopard, yeah? Yours is this big, mine is that big. That sounds wrong. Anyway, so if your aperture is this big, mine is that big, mine will focus easier and faster. And that's the important thing with low light. So the 2.8 lenses will always win in low light because it can focus faster and better because it opens more and more light comes in for the camera to lock onto. So to go back, you saying I'm looking to get a wider aperture lens like a 70-200 to assist with low light shooting. Do it because it will work. Even if you use that 2.8 at f8, it will still focus and lock at 2.8. That's how they work. And when you shoot, it narrows down to give you the depth of field that you want. Just on the side, I'm assuming here low light doesn't necessarily mean spotlight, but rather dusk and dawn, because that's a whole different ball game. Shooting with a spotlight, 2.8, you're going to need. High ISO, you're going to need. So I'm taking this is just dusk and dawn when the light is down. Then my answer stands. Good luck with that, and let me know if I can help with anything else. And thanks for listening. All right, that is that one. We have 1, 2, 3 to go. Now, the next, what did I put? This is from Ian Fox. Ian says, hey Gerry, hope this message finds you well. I'm Ian Fox, a wildlife biologist and photographer based in Malta in the Mediterranean island. I'm sending this message to commend you on your work. Thank you. I've been following the blogs, videos, and podcasts for some time. I really appreciate the honesty you put into them. Just finished episode 191 of the podcast and can really understand your point and totally agree with your hunting perspective. Now, the hunting thing keeps sticking its head up, and I still want to just share some thoughts on hunting and conservation. People are like, oh no, you can't talk about it. Why not? Why can't we just be real about it? Not now, soon. I'm currently going through a block, and after 12 years, I'm finding it hard to find motivation to go out and shoot. Malta is not the richest of countries when it comes to wildlife, and I'm currently not really able to travel. Listening to the podcast helps the juices flow. Now, I think that's why I put this one in here when I was going through my emails this morning. It's those ruts. When you sometimes get stuck, right? And nothing wants to work, and my photography is just bullshit, and I can't do anything right. You have a couple of choices. Number one, try something else. Get a lens you've never shot before and only use that and see what you can do. Go and get, yesterday I found in the office an infrared camera, which suddenly is like, ooh, now it makes me think differently of light and shadows. Or just don't. Just put your camera down and live life, and when you're ready, go back to it. I've done this once or twice, a couple of years ago, if you've been watching for that long. I lost my mojo completely. I was like, I'm done, can't do this, whatever. Put it away, didn't stress about it. I went through about 3 or 4 safaris where it was like going through the motions, just like shooting, because I kind of have to. It'll come back. It's the same with anything. Whether it's training or life, it'll get back. So don't worry about that lack of motivation. Try something different, or don't try anything at all and just let it be. It works. Then what's the end here? Thank you once again. If any of you ever travel to our small island, feel free to drop me a line. Would gladly offer you a beer. Ian, I'm going to take you up on that one day. Would love to see Malta as well. All right, second last one. This comes from Patrick Clemenson. Hey, Gerry, just wanted to drop you in a line and say how much you enjoy the podcast. Thank you very much. I work in the African travel industry, have been selling Africa for over 20 years now, and love what you're doing and have already learned a lot about photography from the podcast. The company I work for is very much at the high end, but I'm a huge believer that you can have all the luxury in the world, but if the guiding is crap and there's nothing to see, you're wasting your money. But like you said when you did your walk around on Gamamara, it depends on what people are into. What Patrick's mentioning here is I did a vlog where I basically just walked around Angama Mara, which is a very, very fancy luxury lodge. You can go check that out. I often have people say, book me what you would do, which I find ridiculous because in a heartbeat, I'd be canoeing the Zambezi or staying at Louis Camp doing walks and staying at a bush camp. Then I show them the pic of Louis' cute reed chalets, and you can tell by the silence down the phone that it's not their thing. There are so many people out there selling Africa now who just seem to focus on the luxurious accommodation that we seem to forget why people are here, which is what I like about your content. It's about experience. It always has to be about experience. I kid you not, there are even operators here who do Instagram posts talking about leopards when the pic is a cheetah, or Africa's painted dogs yet the pic is a hyena, or my personal fave, come and see Botswana's meerkat when it's a squirrel. Anyway, just want to say good day from Oz and love the podcast. Good day, Pat. So, one of the podcasts coming up is called Luxury versus Experience. Johan digs into exactly this. This is why I chose to kind of include this one. But it's a big deal. I often find people would book a safari through an international operator in the US, UK, wherever, London, Australia, New Zealand, right? They'll book their safari, but the people who book their safari for them has never been to the area, and they will put you in the lodges where they make the most money off you. And that's fact. It just is. So they would book because they want to run a safari operator, and it's very romantic to be in the travel industry. So let's book them at Singita, not at some other place, because our commissions there are bigger, but the experience might not be the same. I'm not saying Singita isn't, just an example. But luxury lodges are great if it's your thing. If you want to have aircon, if you want to close the door of your room in the evening and listen to the aircon going all night long, and you want to have a little charger next to your bed where you can plug in your phone like this, then that's cool. Compare that to sleeping in a tent somewhere next to the banks of the Mara River, where you go to bed, you can hear the birds, you can hear the insects, you can hear lions roaring, you feel a part of Africa. That's experience. The guiding is the experience. Yeah, we've done this before. I'm going to leave you to listen to Johan's podcast. I think it's 263, I think it was, coming up after this. But yeah, Pat, I agree 100%. Experience you need. Now the question begs, can experience take place at a luxury lodge? Yes, some places pull it off pretty nicely. But for a lot of people who don't know, and they speak to agents who should not be actually speaking about Africa because they've never been there, they just look at a brochure and then sell it to you, that's my concern. Because the agent's going to take your money and make their commission on the luxury lodge because they're getting more money there, and you're going to get there and you're going to think, oh, this is cool. It's going to be more of a hotel with game drives than an actual safari experience. And that's very sad, very sad. So Pat, I hope that the people you work with, even if they're high-end, and look. If you stay at a bush camp or a tented camp, it doesn't mean it's not a high-end experience. Difference between high-end accommodation only versus high-end experience. My team, what I do, what every single one of these guys does, we create high-end experiences. Doesn't revolve around what room you sleep in. And that's a fact. So anyway, Pat, sorry, I can carry on there. I'm going to leave you to listen to Johan's podcast coming up. And Pat, I hope that you can educate people on your side as well, because there is nothing better than a true, authentic, real, honest, amazing, awesome African wildlife experience where it's not just about the lodge. Okay, back it up. Last one for now. So this one I mentioned on my Instagram this morning. This This is from Brendan. And Brendan wasn't with me in Svalbard. Great photographer from New York. Go and check him up. Brendan, Brendanbyr. Go and check up his work. Last question for this one. So, I have another question for the podcast. If you've recorded already, it can wait until the next one. No, here we go. When do you make the decision to push through versus pull back? In the gym, in photography, in your business, with your clients, with your staff, etc. When do you decide no gym today because you feel it's counterproductive, because you need the rest versus you need to just suck it up and get it done? The same question can be asked in your own photography when you're feeling uninspired, or with a guest that's struggling or frustrated with their photography. It can also apply to managing your business and your staff. When to push, when to not. How do you read the people and situations? And most important and most challengingly, I believe, when to read and know yourself and whether to push forward and pull back. Cheers, bud. Love the question. Love the question. Now, I do think that a lot of this has to do with DNA and positivity. Let me explain. I was chatting to Andrew Dankwitz this morning. So both him and I are very much into our training. If you follow me on Instagram, I hope you do, because it's pretty awesome. Also, by the way, go to TikTok as well and look me up there. Have a feeling. Go and check me up on TikTok. It's going to be awesome. I was chatting to him this morning. So I train in the mornings. I post my make time. And it's not just because it's a regular content for me to put up, but me posting my after training selfie and putting make time, dues pay, whatever it is, it's almost me saying, I'm done. I've done it. So anyway, getting sidetracked, I spoke to Andrew this morning about training and the stuff I did yesterday. Pretty cool EMOM, good leg session and this. And some people can't train on their own, right? They need a trainer or a class environment to motivate them. And the words I actually said to Andrew this morning is, you know what, if you and I have to go up against each other in a full-on competition, I will literally die on a treadmill under the weights before I give up. So that's the mindset. I think it's DNA. Some people just have it, others don't. And from a gym, okay, let's take them one by one. In the gym, I think you have to be, and with DNA and positivity will come self-awareness, is do you know that you need to take a break? Or are you going to be stupid about it and keep pushing through? I'm lucky in that I've been very physical my whole life. I know what DOMS feels like, delayed onset muscle soreness, that's the lactic acid buildup, or what an injury feels like. I'm also very aware from a pushing through, from a gym point of view, that for me it's a headspace thing. That's when I lose myself. Ears and go. Just music and go. I need that to operate. It's my defrag. It's where I allow my brain to go. So I go to the gym for that as well. So I know why I'm going there. I've many times woken up in the morning, didn't sleep well, I think, fuck it, no, I can't go today. At that point, what I would do is kind of, okay, think to yourself now, listen, what's happening today? Can I, because I wake up at 4 in the morning, can I go to the office? Can I get stuff done? Because that'll make me feel like I've accomplished something. Or am I just going to harden up cupcake and go to the gym and do something? I might then, depending on how much work there is and kind of how I'm really feeling, I might go to the gym and just do an easy 45-minute cycle, right? Just get on the bike and just cycle. It's boring as fuck, but you got to do it. If there was work to do, I wouldn't push myself because, and again, self-awareness, man, it wins. Knowing that if I go to the gym, I'm going to get there and it's going to be like, Or I would rather then not go to gym. This is how my mind works. I would go to the office early, get work done. So that's me, yes, I've done something. And then I almost guilt myself into going the afternoon. Or when I go tomorrow then, I'm like, you know what, you lazy son of a bitch. You did nothing yesterday. Today you better double down. That's me. So the pushing through versus pulling back. I'm not one for pulling back, unfortunately. My mom and dad didn't give me that DNA. So that's it. In photography, push through or pull back, it's similar to we spoke a little bit earlier on here, but there's always a way to push through in photography if your goal is to be better and learn more. It's uncomfortable, and it's always, pushing through is always uncomfortable. But by pushing through your photography, you must try different things. Again, you need to be self-aware enough and know that, listen, I'm not feeling that great about this type of shoot, but let me keep going anyway and see what happens. If you keep doing that for long enough and nothing still happens, you need to have the self-awareness to say that, you know what, let me just put the camera down. Put the camera down and just relax and enjoy the experience, and then take the positive from that. Take the positive from, you know what, I'm going to put my camera down and I'm just going to sit here and think, fuck, how lucky am I to be able to be watching this line in the sunset. The images might not work, but damn, this is a cool experience. So again, self-awareness and positivity. Same with photography. In clients, so now if I have a guest that's struggling or frustrated with their photography, that's different though. That's different for me personally, push through or pull back. There's very few instances, and for those of you that have been on safari with me, you'll agree to this. I won't pull back. The thing that, and Dennis said to this to me, one of my regular clients way back, I find weakness in your photography and I'll go after that, because that's how I can make you better. However, there's a time where I'm not going to keep pushing hard. I'll pull back a little bit, but I'll still try and prod you to the place where you can be better. So when it comes to a client that I'm working with, that I'm there to make them better. Yeah, I won't pull back from that. I might change my approach, but I'm not going to back it up. From a business point of view and from a staffing point of view, again, you have to play the cards on the table. Some days someone might do something or say something and you can joke about it because it's that kind of open environment. Other days that person might be in a tough mood or they just come back from a safari. You need to look at it and judge it on a per case scenario. I can't pull back though. I would always try and find a way to move the needle. It's something I've been telling the guys quite often now, is if you have a shitty day in the office or on safari, it happens, but move the needle. Move the needle from here to there, or from there to there, but do something that moves the needle for yourself, for your business, for your photography, for your clients, as long as you move in the right direction. And by moving, those little changes add up to big changes. We don't have to change the world every day. But if you do one small thing each day, the big things will happen. If you pull back, it won't though. So I feel like I'm going down a motivational thing here, but it wasn't the point. Brendan, so my decision to push through or pull back on everything in life, except when I'm working with someone, because then there's two sides to the coin, right? But all of the rest will be based on DNA. Either you've got it or you don't. It would be based on positivity. What can I do in order to affect the most positivity for me and the people around me? So if it's training, for me, am I going to feel better? I probably will. However, then I play up, how will I feel if I go to training and I do an average session, or do I go and train, or do I go to the office and get good work done? Play them up and see where I can do the most positive for myself. And then it's self-awareness. It's just knowing. There's nothing wrong with taking a day off training. But don't take 2, 3, 4 days. And that's where I use it. I've got a very interesting head. I wish I could show you guys what happens up here. Scary as hell. But I would use me not training or having a bad session. I would then go the route of guilting myself mentally. The next time I get there, I'm going to fucking crush it. So, yeah, it's a great question. It's something we should actually discuss when I see you in New York again. But pushing through and pulling back, I can't pull back, man. I just don't do it. Great question. Anyway, guys, there we go. Episode 260 of the Wildlife Photography Podcast. And yeah, some really, really cool stuff there. Like I said earlier on, the following couple of episodes are already mixed, edited, ready to go. And I'll be releasing all of them very, very soon. If you have any questions that you would like me to help you with or to try and answer for you, my email, gerry@wildeye.co.za. That's Gerry, Gerry, @wildeye with a dash in between.co.za. Or just hit me up on any of the social media networks, Gerry van der Walt. And I would look forward to hearing from you. Again, if I don't get back to you on email immediately, I will. Some of these that I read here, I think were from May this year. I will get to them eventually. It's just that some days, like I said, the last week has kicked my ass a bit, but I love it. Can't pull back, remember? So, guys, thank you for listening. Thank you for your time. Thank you for lending me your ears. If you're listening to this on iTunes, it would mean the world to me if you'd go and rate and review it. And if you think anybody could benefit, share it with them. Really would mean the world. That's it for now. Thank you, guys. My name is Gerry. I'm from Wild Eye. I'll chat to you next time.